Okay, good evening. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board and Chair of the Select Board Committee on Policing Reform. And this is a meeting of the committee for September 9, 2020. We're going to start off our meeting by hearing from Ms. Williams, Devin Williams, and Mr. Downey, Michael Downey. Michael's from the Town Council office on issues related to open meeting law and other interesting things which are affecting us. Okay. Devin, Michael?
Sure, I'll go ahead and get started, and then I will kick it over to Michael to get into a little bit more of the legalese. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Devin Williams. I'm the Director of Administrative Services for the town, and I am staffing you on this committee. A few of you have reached out to me, about the best way to communicate with the group, and that is to share any items for distribution or discussion with me, and then I will pass that along to the group. When you are in an email exchange with this whole body, it is an open meeting law violation. So even a quick, passing along of an article or a back and forth can get us into a little bit of trouble. And Michael can, explain the how and why of all of that. But I'm here to let you know that the process that this group should use moving forward is going through me, and there will be a sort of a two-prong approach to that we used with the select board that I'll share with you. So for example, all backup materials that will be used as supporting documentation for a meeting will need to be submitted to me 1 week in advance of the meeting. That way, you'll have a better chance of getting that item on the agenda. And when Bernard is putting together the agenda, which, as you folks know, does need to be publicly posted 48 hours in advance of your meeting. So if your meetings are normally on Wednesdays, the absolute last time that I can post is on Monday, which means I'd like, everything in hand by Thursday or Friday, so you all have ample time to review it. So that's the first case scenario. If there's something that you come across in passing that doesn't need to necessarily be part of your meeting packet or is not going to be for formal vote on the agenda, and you're like, I'd just like the group to read this in advance of the next time we gather, or I saw this in Newton and I thought it was interesting, you can pass that over to me and I will send it along via email. There doesn't really need to be a timeline for that. I'd also, like to, for those folks who are not familiar with OneDrive, that is how we are sharing documents internally for you to review. And then all of those documents are then publicly posted in the packet, like I mentioned. But if anyone has trouble using OneDrive or accessing it, I do recommend that you bookmark that folder, and that's kind of a live living entity where resources will be stored in addition to the police committee reforms page, which is essentially the public access version of that. So process as it stands for communicating with this group. Bernard had a good example of it. Late last night, he sent me the educational working document and asked me to say, Bernard is sharing this with you all. It's in its draft form. And then I was able to share that with you via OneDrive. So that's kind of an example of how that would work. And if it were something that were going on the agenda, like I said, we'd need it a week in advance so that we could make sure it got on the agenda, and then everyone had ample time to review those materials. And then if it's more of like a passing or an informational document, then you can send that over to me and just say, hey, please share this with the group at your earliest convenience. Does that make sense? And does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Devin. And that, by the way, I hate to use this word, but that trumps my email of a couple of days ago, or maybe last week, regarding sending requests to the police department through me. Those requests should go to Devin, and she'll work with me and with Chief O'Leary to get those things to the police department. So, any other questions? No? Okay, Michael, tell us what we can do. If for example, I want to deploy 2 people to go and figure out how to edit a document for the committee. Is that creating committee that's subject to the open meeting law? Is that just two people working on a project?
No, I mean, that just to edit a document, I think would be fine. But I think, for example, we have the subcommittee on, that's taking a look at civilian complaints. So subcommittees are within the definition of, and subject to, within the definition of a public body, and therefore subject to the open meeting law. And the law actually does have a definition for subcommittees, and it is any multiple member body created to advise or make recommendations to a public body. So this committee being a public body, that subcommittee, which is created or established to go back and compile information and then make recommendations or reports back to the committee, I think that would fall within the definition of a subcommittee and therefore subject to the open meeting law. But it's in the civilian complaints is a topic or subject that is within the jurisdiction of the committee. And so that is also a factor that, needs to be met in order to be subject to the open meeting law. So I think in your example, just to edit a document wouldn't necessarily be like with, the topic or subject that would be within the jurisdiction of this or to be addressed by this committee. And I don't think therefore it would be subject to the open meeting law that, those two people coming together to edit a document. But the civilian complaint committee, getting back to Michael's question earlier, that would be those meetings, of the civilian complaint committee, a quorum. And I think the subcommittee is 3 people. So a quorum of that subcommittee would therefore be subject to the open meeting law, and therefore the agenda is posted, the notice is posted, the agenda is posted, a link is posted to allow the general public to participate or to attend and look in. I don't think they actually participate.
So what about the actual situation where I sort of appointed myself in a certain sense to look at the issue of banning chokeholds, and I'm going to come back to the committee with a proposal. Clearly, the answer can't be that I am a subcommittee that has to post meetings and things like that.
No, I just think logistically, I don't know how that would work either. I guess you just send a link to your home and people are going to watch you do some work at home. I don't think that would be.
No, we're not going to do that.
No. So I think you're clear there, Bernard.
Okay.
But I do think like the civilian complaint one is the example that I was going to raise as an example for tonight.
But also more specifically, if 2 people on the civilian complaints subcommittee talk to one another, is that 2 of 3? Is that a quorum which constitutes a meeting?
That would be my my opinion would be yes.
Can we make a quorum?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we make quorum the all 3 members of the committee?
Well, no, a simple majority, quorum under the open meeting law is a simple majority. So if you have the subcommittee of 3, the simple majority would be, the 2.
Okay. So maybe you're about to get to this, but how do we post agendas and hold meetings as a subcommittee?
I think that would be, I did just see Devin's mute go unmuted. And I think that would be through Devin, the same way that this committee's meetings and agendas are sort of facilitated through Devin. But Devin, I don't know if you wanted to jump in.
Well, wait, can we make the subcommittee 4 so that the majority is 3?
Actually, an even numbered committee, and I believe an even numbered committee that if that 2 would be the quorum. But I double check
I like
that.
Bernard's idea, but I have an alternative one. I looked at the open meeting law because of the subcommittee, and there is an exception to the quorum rule. Right in the quorum rule has an exception by executive order, but I see no definition in the law what an executive order means in that context. Could the executive of Brookline, the Board of Selectmen designate a quorum rule for that subcommittee to be 3 people?
I think, the way that I've because I was trying to find some more guidance with respect to subcommittees as well, and what meets the definition of subcommittee. But what I keep going back to is the purpose of the open meeting law, and I wanted to make mention of this to make sure that everyone's aware of this as well. The purpose of the open meeting law is to ensure transparency in deliberations of on public policy. And so I think anytime that I face a question where I'm a little unsure, I could articulate arguments on both sides. I keep going back to that purpose. And so I think, if there's ever a complaint that's filed with the AG's office, I would think that if it's a tough call, they're going to lean towards the purpose, and that is to ensure transparency. So I think that's sort of along the lines of a question that was raised the last time. Couldn't we just call it a different name, not a subcommittee? I don't think we want to want to do that. I think we want to follow the best practices, which would be, if it is a subcommittee, it's a subcommittee, and if it has to be posted, then it has to be posted, and allow the public to participate or weigh in.
Okay, Anne?
So a suggestion might be is that you have a 5-person subcommittee, and Bernard as chair, you're on every subcommittee, and then you have one other person, so that that 2 people can have a conversation and be functional. And then as far as if they're doing functional work, and then when you're having a deliberation where it's 3, then you would post the meeting, because otherwise you're going to end up in this administrative nightmare of scheduling meetings every time Michael wants to talk to someone. And that might be a suggestion to do that, because if Michael is working with Etienne or someone else to work on something, or June or Dwayne or whomever, if the 2 of them are functionally working to look at this and collaborating in a working setting, you want them to be able to do that, and then bring something to the 5-person group or the 3-person group or whatever else, to present the research, but not be stymied to actually sit and look at data or look at policies, without having to call that public meeting and present the information that they put together.
Right, okay. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Well, the one thing that the one thing that I would be, that I raise is that serial communications, and I think this was raised just as I jumped on, serial communications between, so if a non-majority, a non-quorum are discussing or deliberating on issues within their jurisdiction, but then that conversation is then shared with the quorum, that is a violation of the open meeting law. So I think if that would be, if you're doing it that way, those 2 people that are having that conversation would have to be very careful not to share their conversation with the rest of the group, because then that's a serial communication. Right. That would be then, violation of the open meeting law if it's not noticed and posted. So,
Okay, well, so people just should be aware of that, and we should set up our subcommittees as 5 members.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Marty.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Michael, not now, but can look into 2 questions that have come up in this conversation. First is, I don't think we should have bigger subcommittees, because I think we're going to need several subcommittees, and nobody's going to want to be on 2. So the 2 things that I'd like Michael to look into are, number 1, the question if it's a subcommittee of 4, and Bernard is on it, at least as a member, not to do any heavy lifting since he's doing so much. What is really a majority? I'm puzzled by the thought that 2 is a majority of 4. Usually it would have to be 3. So that's question 1. The second question was my earlier one about an executive order. Can the Board of Selectmen issue an executive order that a subcommittee of 3 has a quorum of 2? That would seem to comport with the open meeting law, but there's no definition there of executive order. That's it for now. I'm hoping to get more guidance on that. It's really difficult with the 3 people. Michael and I have talked about stuff, knowing that there was an issue, but there's also such a thing as practicality. The open meeting law makes it difficult. So
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that, Michael.
I
Okay,
will do that. Yes.
okay. Devin, were you about to say something?
Sure. So I will send a little one pager to the committee, pretty much summarizing what I just mentioned, and also including the deadlines for if you are a subcommittee chair, when I will need your agenda by in order to properly post. And if folks have their own Zoom accounts that they can use for meetings, that's great. If not, we should be able to accommodate you. But I know other smaller working groups are using their own accounts so as not to tie up other accounts, but we can always cross that bridge when we get to it. But you will send all of your agendas and postings for me. I'll just need it, probably 2.5 days in advance at a minimum to be able to get everything up and posted properly in time.
And by the way, when we say agendas, we're not talking about anything really elaborate. And for example, the agenda for the online educational meeting that I sent Devin, actually it's probably longer than it should have been, but it's basically said topic, colon, discussion of online agenda education or online educationals. So, I mean, minimal information is all that's really required, not anything really detailed. So people know what's being discussed.
And then I just wanted to follow up. All of you should have received your email from me with the open meeting law, public records law, attorney general training, all of that information. Town council's office usually does provide a training, but I wanted to just sort of get a temperature check from this group. Have you all completed that? Are you in the process of it? Are you hoping that because you're on another committee, you don't have to?
When I reached out to them, they said that they treat giving us those materials as good enough for now, and that whenever they schedule a future meeting or training, they will let us know, something to
Okay.
that.
One of the links in your email is the Attorney General's ethics training. So just be sure that I can also resend that if folks need me to, but what will happen is you'll take a short quiz, you print it out, you sign it and send it into the clerk's office. And then we just have that on record that you've done it. So I just wanted to do a temperature check. I know there's a lot of information in those first couple emails when they go out. But like I said, I will send a one pager on everything that I've shared with you tonight, and also a little primer on just how to access materials on our OneDrive site and on the public facing website. And if you guys have any questions in the interim, you can always reach out to me directly.
Great, thank you.
Will you add that
I'm sorry.
to that page, Devin, too, for the ethics?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Michael, you about to say
Yeah, if I
something?
could just add one extra thing. I think Devin did address it, but I just want to make sure, I came prepared to address it, so I might as well. When exchanging emails, that emails can be, are considered communications with the group, so with the quorum, with the committee. And so just to be careful not to express opinion on matters within the body's jurisdiction. That you can share agendas or scheduling or reports or documents that you may discuss at the upcoming meeting, but be sure not to, be careful in terms of expressing your opinion on the issues that are to be discussed. And that includes too, if you can't email a document and say, here's a document I want to discuss tonight, but then within that you open the document and then it contains your opinion on the issues. It can be an article or something like that. I want to discuss the article tonight, but it can't be within the body of the email or within the document that's attached, an opinion on issues that are within this committee's jurisdiction.
Okay, yes,
I have,
go ahead.
that reminded me of another question, please. I think I put this into one of my informational emails, but the question is, on the hypothetical possibility that there's someone in the community that will ask for a public records request of each of our individual emails, which has come up, as a couple of you know. Is there a chance that all of those could be kept in a central place so that we won't have to individually answer?
You mean your the emails that are,
emails to committee members or to the chair or to the whole committee. Those are public records, as you know.
yeah, so I guess it would be if we received a request along those lines, then we would look through, Devin, like we would look through the email exchanges relating to this committee and provide it that way. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, so Marty, I'm not going to keep a copy of every email. Like, I'm not going to save PDFs of emails that you folks have sent. What I do is every email that comes in that's related to this committee goes into a folder. And then, like Michael said, we have a formal public records process internally where we would use that if it were to come up.
And let me just add, any communications to me related to this committee should go to my town email box. My position, I know Michael is going to object to this, but my position is I don't have any obligation to go through my personal emails, to look for town stuff. There's just so much clutter in there that that's useless. So anything that goes to my town email becomes a public record and accessible by the town. So don't send me anything to my private email address.
Which email address do you use for correspondence?
It's bgreen@brooklinema.gov.
But that's the main email you use, like when you send stuff to this committee?
That's my town email. Anything related to town business of any sort should go there.
Right. I guess I'm just wondering, I haven't had a chance to actually look at your email, the one that you've been using to send stuff to everyone. That is your town email.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. I guess that's it. Now, next item on the agenda is Officers Pilgrim and Walker.
We have the minutes.
We have them. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the second thing. Okay, has everyone looked at the minutes from the meeting of September, when was our last meeting?
It was August 26th.
Oh, August 26th, right.
And there are two versions that you folks should have had a chance to review. So I sent the minutes out to the entire group yesterday, and then Marty sent a revised version, and that was also circulated to this group.
Okay, any corrections to the minutes by members of the committee? Okay, I move approval of the minutes of August 26, 2020 as
Are you
amended.
including my amendments?
Yes, as amended.
Okay, thanks.
All in favor? I guess we have to go through a roll call. Devin, can you do the roll call? Or I'll do it. Okay.
Can we raise hands? Can we raise hands?
It needs to be a roll call on Zoom, and I can do it if you feel ready for this. If everyone just wants to unmute, I'm going to go right in the order of the panelist list, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen.
Okay.
Marty?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Oh, it keeps changing. Michael?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Ron?
And Raj? Raj?
Yes.
Ronald?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
All right, that should be all the voting members.
Okay, so now let's get down to the meat of things. Our officers Pilgrim and Walker in the room.
I'm promoting them now.
Okay, great. So officers Pilgrim and Walker will be making a presentation on their experiences and their perceptions and points of view as young Black officers in the Brookline Police Department, as well as some initiatives that they have been pushing in the realm of reform and reimagining of policing. So Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. My name's David Pilgrim. Obviously, I'm a Brookline police officer. A little bit about me before that, though, is I was born and raised in the town. I grew up here. I went to a private school in Cambridge for my elementary school, but I graduated the high school in 2010. My parents are still local. They still live in the town, and I recognize a few faces here. So some of what I'm saying is a repeat for some of you, but I've been a Brookline police officer since 2016. It's about 4 years. In that time, I've worked with a lot of different officers, a lot of different people, and a lot of different agencies. And I've always had a passion for policing, and I'm excited to kind of work on the future steps of the Brookline Police Department, as well as policing in general. And I'll turn over to Will to introduce himself.
Hi, Officer Will Walker, Brookline Police, obviously. I was born and raised in Boston, Mass. Grew up in Dorchester, Fields Corner neighborhood. So I'm kind of a Brookline transplant. I was introduced to Brookline through a college internship, a co-op for Northeastern University. I worked in crime analysis. And that's how I kind of got my introduction and my foot in the door here in Brookline. You know, I was kind of taken by like the culture of the town, the culture of the department. It's something that really struck me and something that I really felt like I want to be a part of. So I moved to town, fulfilled my residency requirement, and I got on the Brookline Police Department in 2014. I've worked all 3 different shifts, days, midnights, evenings. Currently, I'm assigned to the day shift patrol, canine handler for a bomb detection dog, also a member of the Brookline Special Response Team. So I've held many roles here at the department, many specialty positions, and in my short time in law enforcement, and been fortunate enough to work for a lot of different leaders and view different leadership styles here at the department. And I, like Dave, we're excited to kind of push this department forward, and help reimagine and help make this a fulfilling career for both of us, because we have a long career left. God willing, you know, we 30 years left to help make the department and the town better and safer for everybody. So without any further ado, we kind of, once the incident in the George Floyd incident happened, you know, we kind of took a step back, and there are things that Dave and I, recognized that the department could do better, and talking with other officers, we noticed, there was kind of an attitude that, there are some things that we'd like to change. And, we kind of don't like how traditionally things are done, even before the incident, but even more so afterwards. Dave and I met with the Lieutenant O'Neill, and he kind of empowered us to say, as, 2 young Black officers, you guys should take the reins and just, if you guys, I know you're both very smart officers, you guys have some ideas and thoughts of how to make this place better, and you guys should run with that, and you have the full support of myself and, at the time, Chief Lipson. So that's kind of what we did. We created an internal task force, and we kind of started meeting with officers, pulling people together in smaller working groups, and just picking their brains on what they thought our department did well, things they thought our department didn't do well, and things that they thought we could improve on, and how to improve on those things. And some of the things that came out of those meetings were that 99% of our interactions, officers felt like they were positive and they were good, and they felt good about those interactions. And over the years, our trajectory, and again, this is coming from the officers and the meetings that we've had with minority officers and officers that have been here for a lot longer than we have, the trajectory of the department is going up. It continues to be more community policing oriented. It continues to take into account several aspects of mental health and how to better respond to those incidences and how to better serve our community. Our officers felt that we were on a good trajectory, and we're far and ahead, better serve our community than most departments surrounding us. Another thing that came out was that we don't have the use of force here. And what I mean by use of force is an officer having to physically take control of a subject or use force to gain compliance, whether that be to escort somebody out by holding their arm or escort them to the ground to effect an arrest, or deploying chemical like OC spray or any other type of munition. we don't have a lot of use of force here in Brookline, and that's mostly due to the training that we receive. We receive more training than majority of the departments around us, and also the numbers and how we respond to calls. So, you know, when, just an example, when, you know, if you drive by and see officers dealing with someone, oftentimes you'll see a supervisor, the sector car, and then maybe one or two other officers. And just that level of response oftentimes makes it so that we don't have to use force, because the sheer number of officers there, everyone's able to slow things down and keep it cool. And also, if there is an officer that is not being effective in communicating, or the person, for some whatever reason, the subject that's being dealt with doesn't like that officer, it's very easy and very quick to swap that officer out and continue that interaction with another officer on scene, because they're already there, including a supervisor. Oftentimes you see a supervisor's already there. So those are some of the things that we thought that our department does very well, and that we were on a very good trajectory. Some of the things that we discovered that the officers didn't really like, and some of the things that we don't do well, is, you know, for a long time, the department was a numbers-driven approach to policing. And when I say numbers-driven, I mean, how many traffic stops have you made? How many parking tickets have you issued? How many arrests do you have? How many FIs do you have? Now, it's hard to quantify and to judge an officer based on how they interact, because that person, whoever they interact with, oftentimes just walks away. They just go away, and you can't stop and give everybody a survey after they interact with officers. But if you have positive interaction, how do you quantify that? How do you qualify that and use that to judge an officer? So a lot of times it was judged on how many parking tickets can you write and how many citations can you issue. And officers felt like that wasn't a good judge of their character and the work they do. Because oftentimes, and especially for me, and I know for Dave, I don't really, it's about education, right? So if I see someone make like oftentimes in Coolidge Corner, we all see it, the turn across the train tracks, the left across the train tracks, we see it time and again. And 9 times out of 10, it's a parent from out of state that's dropping their kid off at BU that just has no idea that you can't turn across the train tracks because it's wide open. And it's about education and you know, just letting people know how and why you do things. So we felt that officers relayed to us that wasn't a good judge of how they do their jobs, or like how good of an officer they are, how many tickets they write. It's predatory. It doesn't serve a purpose for the public, and it makes people feel like they're always going to just be stopped when they come into Brookline. Another thing that we found, and especially in one thing that I brought up specifically, was a lack of like basic understanding as law enforcement for stops. And this goes into the numbers-driven approach. So oftentimes officers would just make FIs, and an FI is a field interview. Anytime you have an interaction with someone, they would grab an ID and then get a full criminal history license check on the subject they're dealing with. And I think a lot of that stems from the pressure of feeling like you have to identify people, the pressure that you have to have an FI on record, the pressure from upper management that you need to have a numbers to show this interaction. And I think that pressure created a negative interaction cycle where officers were just identifying people without really understanding the right to identify or the need to identify or why they're doing what they're doing. So I think that this numbers-driven approach kind of is going to pop up a lot during some of the things that we talk about, but it led to more of the predatory or authoritarian policing, you know, that we had here, or that officers felt like they were being pressured to do. And most times officers just want to get your first name and talk to you like a normal person. You want to pick up that?
Yeah. So one thing I should have said at the beginning when I was making my introductions is, obviously I'm a police officer now, but I've been a Black man for 28 years and I cannot change that. That's who I am. That's who I always will be. So that's how I approach everything I do. And that's kind of my experience first. But I also have this added experience of being a police officer for 4 years, which obviously here and now helps me, and it allows me to think about things from 2 different angles that sheds a different light than I think many people will ever be able to fully grasp or have. But continuing on of what we were talking about, the things that we don't do, so well. We'll talk on it a little bit earlier, but because we have a certain number of officers on each call, so we can always kind of tag someone out. So if the situation isn't going well, or if someone isn't able to properly de-escalate the situation, there's a pretty good chance that someone else on scene there, whether it's the supervisor or one of our partners or someone who's a little more advanced trained in certain areas of, CIT, whether it's, they're an advanced CIT trained officer or what, can usually step in and diffuse that situation a little bit. And as we talk about all these different things that we could do better or don't do so well, and the things that we do well, that's the easy part. The hard part that Will and I have been trying to work on is, well, okay, then what? If we don't do those things so well, what's the next step? How do we fix that? How do we improve upon those things? Our proposed item for that is we want to hold a in-service class with the entire department. And we want, every year we go through in-service training. That's basically just continuing education training. Our proposed in-service class would be an 8-hour day where we go over the different situations that we see. So we're talking the suspicious person call where, an anonymous person calls in and states that there is let's say an individual sitting on a park bench, doesn't have a shirt on, but they're not necessarily doing anything beyond that. So is there a crime happening? Is there the possibility a crime's gonna happen? The officer needs to be aware of that, as Will was saying moments ago. And our goal is to get everybody in the department on the same page so that maybe in that situation, we're not intervening. We're kind of just observing that person and saying, okay, well, it's a nice day out. They don't have their shirt on, but they're not doing anything wrong. So I'm going to let them continue on. Maybe you get a little more information though, and that changes the situation. You approach it differently, but we want to get out of that habit of just IDing people for the sake of IDing them. We want to get out of the habit of just getting that number for the purpose of having that number. That's our main goal here, to legitimize policing, as Will said, for the next 30 years, so that when we're here, it's still a respected profession when we leave.
Yeah, and so, like I said, a majority of the things that we talk about and the majority of the issues that we found from our coworkers and in this department are due to a pressure to have a result from an interaction. And that just breeds, and that's not what the public's asking for now. That's not what our officers frankly want to do. What they want to do is make sure that everybody's safe, and they want to be the best police officer that they can be. Through everyone that we've talked to in the department, everyone has the same thought process. They all want to be, the same. They all have the same agenda, but it's an overall pressure from the top. Another thing that we learned from our coworkers, they felt the uniform might be a little aggressive and a little too old-fashioned and not as forward thinking as some other departments in the area, and it doesn't really serve. It kind of intimidates the general public. Now, Devin, I don't know if you could share that PowerPoint that I sent to you. Do you have it on this computer?
Do you guys have it? Because I actually can't share it. So you have sharing privileges.
Yeah. Yeah, your work email. Yes.
Everyone also does have a copy of this in their packet. And so you can pull that up if you're looking at it at home.
This is a PowerPoint that I created, obviously on August 1st, but it's taking input from the officers, a lot of senior officers as well. This is kind of where they wanted to see the uniform go. And I agree. I think, if you have a uniform where officers feel comfortable in, they're going to respond more comfortably. And if you have a uniform that appears softer around the edges and doesn't kind of come off as much of like the old fashioned, hard, shiny, aggressive look, I think people will feel more approachable. I think our uniform standards here at the Brookline Police Department haven't really updated. in 30 years. It's been a very long time. So let's see. So the standard uniform patrol shirt suggestion was just a dark navy polo or a polo type shirt with a sewn in badge number on the chest and the officer's name. Brookline police patches on the arms, and then the back to say something like police, similar to these two gentlemen here. Just like a more comfortable shirt, a little bit softer around the edges, a little bit easier. I think a little bit more approachable than, you know, an officer in a Class A type uniform, similar to like what Dave's wearing. Patrol vest, if you know, back problems are very prevalent with policing because oftentimes we have a lot of gear hanging on our waist and it gets very heavy and very hard to deal with over time. You know, 30 years is a long time. So we suggested a load bearing carrier. Officers have the option to wear just their vest under their polo shirt or a load bearing carrier over it, just to take some of the weight and some of the pressure off their backs and their hips. And it's just, it could really go a long way into prolonging some people's backs and careers. You could put, and then in the winter, you can just have the load bearing vest go over your top or with a jacket on over it or under it. Just give officers options with how they want to present themselves in like a nice, clean, crisp way. That's a little bit soft around the edges, like I said. The pants, just a cargo style pant, flexible, they're comfortable, and it doesn't, you know, doesn't have that rough look to it. They're cheaper, which is great for us, but you're just more flexible, more comfortable. And, you know, sometimes the job requires you to bend down and move around. So it just, again, it helps with morale. And I think that in general, the public will feel a little bit more confident and comfortable with approaching an officer that's kind of dressed down and not so much in kind of like the stormtrooper type uniform. For a patrol hat, instead of like the sharp, shiny 8-point hat, just a basic ball cap with a patch on the front or badge number on the rear or sewn into the side. Again, dark navy, a dark blue color. Detail, you know, oftentimes you drive by on details, you see all different types of vests and shirts, and it just kind of, you don't know who's who and what's what. So we just suggested like a very brightly colored shirt, high visibility, patches on both arms, just like the standard uniform shirt that we suggested earlier. And then just outwear just a dark navy blue jacket if the officer chooses to. But the overall message there is just to soften the uniform. I think the officers and the public would greatly benefit from a uniform that isn't so traditional, and is because traditional policing needs to change. It needs to be moved away from. And I think one of the first steps and easier steps that can be done tomorrow is to just have a different uniform, a softer uniform, a more approachable uniform for everybody, the officer and the public. So those are some of our initial findings that we had. You know, a numbers-driven approach isn't really how the officers or how the public wants us to respond or handle things in town. And, you know, just to empower officers to make good decisions and to be comfortable in their uniforms and respond comfortably. Some of the things that we found that might be roadblocks are, unfortunately, just the department is there's a lot of young, motivated officers in the department that have good ideas, that want to see those ideas come to fruition and have where they think the department should go. And they're vested, frankly, because they have time left. Like Dave and I, like I'm here for, I've God willing, again, for 30 years, and I want those 30 years to be as fun and rewarding as possible. But there's no opportunity, and it kind of, we run into roadblocks of like a stagnant old mentality of like, well, this is just the way we've always done things. It's kind of like it's a refusal, just like well, I don't like that, so I don't really know. I used to do it this way, but I don't want to do it that way. So it's a mentality that we're having trouble with breaking through. You know, if something doesn't change for 30 years, I mean, you just got to get with the time. So I think, you know, a predominantly white, predominantly over 50 command staff. It's just they don't have the same sight and vision that younger officers and younger supervisors do. And I think that we're kind of running into those issues where like it's just, while it's good for the public and good for the manpower and everyone else, the department, it's just we can't get through to those who've been in charge for frankly too long, in my opinion. But
With all that being said, I would say easily 75% of this department is on board with changing policing, becoming better community caretakers, and just kind of reevaluating everything we do. And that's just from my conversations that I've had with individual officers and individual supervisors. I think lack of change has led to a retention issue in the Brookline Police Department, which is going to then turn into a recruitment issue. And those, maybe recruitment doesn't sound like a huge deal right now, but the quality and the type of officer that takes the test or potential officer that takes the exam is going to dictate the type of officer we have for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And if we want to continue having the well-educated, well-spoken, temperamented officers that we luckily have right now, we have to do something about that yesterday, honestly. In this past calendar year, we've lost 4 officers, 3 to different police departments and 1 to a fire department. There's a reason for that. It's not like they're, getting out of public safety in general. They're just getting out of Brookline. And there are a lot of reasons behind that, many of which we've talked about today. And I don't know, I guess that's kind of a scary thought for me in terms of who we're going to see in the future as our, comrades and our backup.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, Dave said, retention is a big problem here in Brookline. And we need to get with the times. I think some of the uniform standards and different approaches to policing are kind of what's leading officers away from here. But like you said, we as 2 young Black officers have an amazing amount of support from some of those younger supervisors that I talked about, and from people in management, and from our coworkers. We've been empowered like to the nth degree, and we have the respect and ears of many of the people that we worked with. Like, it's just it's good to see, and it feels good, and we do want to see change. And we're just going to keep working on it and keep fighting. I sent an email out to our department last night regarding a podcast that I had listened to. That was done by 2 Black officers in Florida, and they kind of talked about they can take the uniform off, but they can't take their skin off, right? And they talked about how as Black officers, their voices aren't often heard, and no one kind of listens or respects the messages that they give or the experiences that they have. So like Dave said earlier, he's been Black his whole life. We can't change what we look like outside of this uniform. So when we've experienced racism ourselves, not in the department, we wouldn't work somewhere that we experience racism, but we have experienced it. We know what it looks like, and we know when it's not there, and we know what we can do to change, and we know what we can do to help be the change we want to see. So, some of the responses I got from that podcast, I just got, response after response from officers about how enlightening it was, and how they enjoyed it, and how they want to keep hearing things. And many of the officers went on to continue to listen to several episodes in the series, just because that's the kind of officer that we have here in Brookline at the moment. That's the kind of police department that's here. They're thirsty for knowledge. They want to be the change. And that's why they took this job. Dave and I both agree that we can be the change. This department is head and shoulders above many others, but there's still work that needs to be done. And a part of that is just changing some of the old things and just walking into 21st century policing. And we're going to continue to work on it and continue to keep fighting to affect change.
Great.
One thing Will just said, which I think is huge, and we kind of glance over it and forget to say it because it's so obvious to us. Just to set the record straight, neither myself or Will have ever experienced any type of racism from within this department. In town, absolutely. From my coworkers, not a single time. Growing up, I've been stopped by the police. I've ran from the police. All those things. I was a teenager at one point. I've done dumb things, right? But I've never once been treated unjustly here. And I'm speaking for myself only. I know I can't speak for, everyone, but my personal experiences and Will's personal experiences. And I think that's huge, and that people oftentimes overlook that aspect, or that some people do have that experience here.
Okay, thank you. Could you share with the entire committee the podcast you referred to?
Yes, it's called The Real Minority Report. I think he uploads it onto Spotify, which is a free app. And the episode, there are a lot of episodes, but the episode is called "I Can Take My Uniform Off, but Not My Skin." They're very short listens. That one is only 28 minutes long. There's some 11 minutes. There's some, 3 or 4 minutes. And the topics range from, the first Black police officer at this gentleman's department to school resource officers to the first LGBTQ officer that he had at his department. So it's running created by a young Black officer, and he's just very well spoken. And the topics they cover are very important topics, and topics that are relevant to today. And again, very short listens. And I think, it speaks to some of the experiences that we have, and it kind of it gives a voice to other Black officers, even, sometimes that their voice can't be heard.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do, mindful of the time, is to give the committee, let's say, no more than 10 minutes to ask any questions. It's been a very, very helpful to me, presentation, and I'm sure it's it's provoked a lot of questions in the minds of the committee members. So let's just take a few and short if possible. I see Jonathan hands up.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, Will and Dave, I just want to first of all thank you for being here. I have a pleasure of knowing Dave and other officers like Shenai and others who went through DHS. So I'm glad to see you representing. It is hard with the history of policing in Brookline, and the most recent past in issues of racism within the police department in Brookline. It is very hard to kind of bring about a cultural shift, with the sort of status quo that is in place. And so easy changes like police uniforms are great, but they are nonetheless a band-aid to a deep issue that have nonetheless been in place for a long time. So I just want to acknowledge that up front. I have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to ask them all.
Why don't you prepare them and maybe
no, I will. I have a question I'm going to ask.
Okay, a question, but the others, prepare and maybe we can send them to David and Will.
Absolutely, I certainly will do that. So you mentioned, Will, you mentioned, that the lieutenant back then, O'Leary, I think you might have said, 2 young Black officers, take the reign on what have you, that you to kind of put forward. I just wonder, I'm interested in why specifically 2 young Black officers should take the reign on systemic issues. Were there, other officers, white officers, for instance, that showed interest in the kind of work that you were hoping to do, or that, are there other people other than Black people taking the reign in leading the charge forward in the work that you're hoping to do?
Yes. So the initial task force that we had, it contained majority minority officers, and then we kind of formulated a plan of what we wanted to do. So we held a meeting and we opened it to everybody in the department, save for supervisors, because we have different roles and we wanted people to be able to speak freely. And it was attended by almost 30 officers. white, black, female, male, just young, old. So it was attended by anyone that wanted to, and a lot of people participated, and a lot of people want to participate. And then the supervisors also held a meeting, and it was attended by majority of the supervisors, and they also came and worked with us, and we have a good working relationship. And to answer the first question, Dave and I were not like vocal, but also like we're just, I don't know, I mean, just naturally we have the respect of our peers, I suppose, so that they kind of just empowered us to say, you know, people respect and listen to what you guys have to say, and you guys have the unique experience of being both Black and police officers. So if this is something that you're passionate about, like, feel free and feel empowered to be able to take the reins and make some changes and suggest some changes that you think our department should take. And the Lieutenant O'Neill was his name. He gave us, you know, his support and said that if there's anything that he can do to help us out as a lieutenant, which was huge because, again, we are just patrol officers, but, you know, some of the things that we wanted to see and want to see, he's worked, and so is Lieutenant Amendola. They've worked to help kind of push our, for lack of a better word, agenda forward and promoting change within the department.
Like I said, 28 years being, you know, a Black male and 4 years being a police officer, it lends a different perspective than a lot of people have, and that lieutenant recognized that for both of us.
Great. Okay, remember, use the hand raise function in Zoom to indicate your interest in asking a question. I think next was Elizabeth, and then Michael, and
Thank you, Will and David.
Marty, you have to use a hand raise function, not your hand.
Thank you very much for speaking. I wanted to follow up on your suggested solution about in-service class training and an 8-hour day. And it sounds like there were several pieces to that I just didn't understand. Would that be more training? And would it be a different kind of a format of training? And then maybe you could speak to the evenness or the unevenness of training across the department. And are there things that you think we could do that would be better for training, especially for the younger officers who are right out there all the time? I mean, are there things that we could do that would really help with that?
So for the service training, we're currently working with Lieutenant Amendola, who is the training lieutenant right now, to fully lock that down. But we want to do scenario-based trainings. We want to incorporate, you know, a lot of the different types of calls that we've been on, even if we, you know, pull directly from our call history and take calls that we've serviced ourselves. And maybe, you know, it's if you're playing a sport, you look at video and you review it and you think about, is there a different way I could have done this, or could I have done this better next time? And that's basically what we're trying to implement in the department, so that we take a hard look at ourselves.
Yeah, here in Brookline, you know, we do 48 hours of training a year, mandatory, and then a lot of additional training on top of that. And a lot of the mandatory training, you know, CPR, the very basic CPR qualifications with our firearms and the tools we have, and then mental health, and then policies and procedures. So we do a lot of standard training. And I think part of our goal is, you know, when you see like a basketball player, like Dave said, they don't practice doing their windmill dunks every day. They practice the fundamentals. And I think one of the things that we can benefit from, and we do have a lot of training in the fundamentals of, you know, like I said, CPR, how to save a life, and policies and procedures, but we don't really go through enough fundamental training of like just responding to calls that we've responded to. So we kind of use that, just going out and servicing calls is, you know, practice almost, or, you know, but instead of doing that, you know, just a refresher and just going through that at least every year or a quarter or whatever the case may be, whatever the training allows for, to just practice the basics, you know, practice the basics over and over again, and just give officers the confidence and the ability to respond to scenarios that they see all the time, and force why they do what they do, and be able to explain it. Because I think a lot of the disconnect is when we do things, sometimes we're not able to explain why we're doing it. We just do it because that's just what we just know to do. But if we go through the practice and over again, we're able to clearly delineate and explain, well, this is why I made this decision, and this is why this is happening. And I think that's going to go far with building some trust with the community.
And just real quick, every officer is CIT trained. You were asking about the younger officers and what training people have. Every officer is CIT trained. Our latest class is getting that, I believe, in a month or so. Some officers, myself included, have gone to an advanced CIT training. We have a drug overdose response team who then goes out to houses after the fact and, you know, kind of checks in with the family. But all training is good training. We need more training. Everybody, there's any job, any profession, there's no such thing as bad training. I think most of our supervisors are on board with that and want us to go to whatever trainings we find out there. It's just a matter of finding them, getting time to go and going. But all training is good. And the academies have changed a lot. I mean, my academy was 24 weeks. We have people who went to 14-week academies. There's a lot more being taught at the academies now. So,
Okay, so mindful of the time, I'm gonna call on Michael, Marty, and Raj, and that's it. If people have questions, why don't you send them in to Devin, and we'll sort of do it that way. Michael, and let's try to be quick because we're running out of time and we have a lot on our agenda.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your perspective, guys. You mentioned supervisors a few times, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is there are few, if any, Blacks and Latinos who hold supervisory positions in the police department. I wanted to hear your perspective on that and whether you thought, what you think ought to be done, if anything, about it.
So, I mean, in my perspective, that's on us. Anybody can take the test to become a supervisor. You just have to study for it and take it and do well on it. Same thing with the recruitment I talked about earlier. We can't choose who takes the test to become a police officer. It's kind of the responsibilities on that individual. And I think that's the same with supervisors. I don't think anybody's being held back personally.
No, yeah, same. I really enjoy my current job and what I get to do and working with my dog. And I personally don't feel like I'm ready to be a supervisor. You're making a lot of decisions and you have a lot of power and authority to kind of lead. And I still ask for help when I'm dealing with a call. I go to a call and I ask for help and response, from supervisors and older officers. So it's a personal, choice, and it's a test-based promotion system. So it's anybody can take it and anybody can do it. We just frankly need to take the test. So
yeah.
Okay, Marty. Quick, Marty. And also unmute. Okay, Marty, you've used up your time. Marty, unmute.
Hi.
Okay,
There. I did it. I hit it twice, but all right. So here's my question. I was very intrigued by the numbers, what you refer to as numbers-driven concept, but I'm going to wait and let Chief O'Leary tell us about that on some other occasion. But my real question relating to that, and I'm trying to have the Civilian Review Committee called an accountability committee, is what kind of feedback do you get on a regular basis as to your performance, even good things? Daily shift commanders, is there periodic personnel reviews? What kind of feedback do you get to help you improve?
So there are quarterly reviews that each supervisor does for their group. Everyone's broken up into group, but then more immediately, if you handle a call well, or if you have a situation well, your supervisor just comes up right to you, and I like the way you did this. Like good job. And they oftentimes do it over the air, so everybody can acknowledge an officer that's done a good job. You hear if you clear a particularly, interesting or difficult call. Good job by everybody. Good job, Officer Walker. Good job, Officer Pilgrim. That's a better to us way to quantify and qualify your work versus how many tickets you wrote that month, because anybody can write a ticket, but not anybody is able to de-escalate a situation and make it so that everyone goes home safe and there's no use of force or everyone gets the services that they need. So
it's hard to judge a police officer, what they do on a daily basis. It's really difficult. So that's how numbers come into play. It's the easy way to say, well, I know for a fact you did this many times. That's an easy benchmark to judge someone by. It's a lot harder to really dive into what each individual officer does. You have to know your officers more. You have to, it's harder. It's a harder thing to do.
Great. Okay, Raj, final call, final question. Raj, you need to unmute.
He's gone.
Okay, here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, got it.
Okay, so you folks talked about having discussed with members of the police force as to what are the things you can improve. So have you had any formal or informal communication with the community that you serve, which might tell you what the community would like you to do in terms of changes?
So
Okay.
I'm currently assigned to the Community Service Division in the Walk and Talk program. The Walk and Talk program works in the Brookline housing developments. So every single day I'm out in the community, I'm walking in Egmont, I'm walking in the High Street developments. That's my entire job. Maybe a month or two ago, I had a community meeting with Sergeant Hatchett, who's here obviously, and several community members, and we just had a point blank discussion. During some of the protests, I think I had a few conversations. So yeah, I mean, it's my job right now is to be out in the community and just get in that perspective.
Yeah, we have a lot of it. I at least have a lot of informal, conversations with pretty much anyone that'll listen is willing to listen to me jump up on my soapbox out on the street. But yeah, just a lot of informal, and this is the beginning of the process for us to kind of reach out. What we wanted to do before we started really going out into the community and kind of getting some feedback was just identifying what we thought our department could do better, and then trying to see what people think we can do better. So this is kind of the first step in that process as these committees start to roll out and proceed.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Officers Pilgrim and Walker. This has been very interesting. I think very helpful to the committee. A lot to digest and think about, and to inform our discussions as we go forward. So thank you. And I think what I'd like to do is, if there are any questions, to be able to forward them to you so that you could, help the committee sort of understand some of the other issues that they may have. Great.
Definitely.
Thank you. Okay. June, did you have your hand up? It's too late for a question, but was there something else that you wanted to?
It was just a comment, actually. I just wanted to comment on the uniforms presentation. And officers, thank you so much for all you're doing. And I know you a little bit from the CIT world, and I just wanted to kind of bring home how important I think this uniform issue is. So in every part of the country, really except for the Northeast, CIT officers and other community officers, community outreach officers, really dress down a lot and are more casual and look more approachable. And I think this is a really, really important issue that's a long time coming to Brookline. I remember actually Casey Hatchett on a 100-degree day once at a Brookline event in her wool outfit, and it's just it's really tough, and it's a tough uniform. Anyway,
okay,
I laud everything you're doing, and I applaud you guys and anything that I can do to help.
Thank you, June. You cheated. You got in a question or a statement. I
was writing to everyone. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand.
Okay.
I'm too old for Zoom.
Devin, put instructions in your the document you're putting together how to raise your hand. Okay, let's move on. Subcommittee reports. We have some subcommittees that report like quick reports. Starting out with the September 23rd online education programs. This subcommittee met before this meeting and talked about the outline that was circulated to the committee. And we've made some changes, and we'll be meeting again and make further changes to this before we begin to do filming of the presentations. Anything else to add to that from the committee? Okay, next, civilian complaints. Marty, or who wants to talk about that?
Michael is the chair.
Okay, Michael, And you're more concise, right?
I think that's news to me, but I'll take it.
Okay.
So a few updates, I guess. One is we're as you know, Bernard, we're still trying to get more information about who's filed complaints, and so I know you forwarded some of that information request to Mr. O'Leary. So we're looking forward to hearing back on that. One other thing that came up, well, I've just been reading a lot about the complaints process and putting some documents together that I shared with the other two members of the committee. And probably by the next time we'll meet, we'll have some kind of memo that I'd like to share with all of you just about complaints process numbers and just sort of recent events related to the complaints process. One interesting thing I learned is that we're supposed to have these reviews every 2 years, biennial reviews of the complaints process, but that's not really happened. And we also never voted on the 2017 recommendations from that particular biennial review. So that's something I learned that I thought was worth sharing. And then finally, there's this issue of body cameras and police cameras that Marty raised that I think we should all, and that I definitely agree with, and I think that we should think about. So we drafted a little statement in support of police body cameras. There's also, as you may know, there's going to be a Warren article about this. But from the complaints process perspective, I think it's just important to know it's very hard to make a finding about a complaint when it's just one person's word against another person's word. And so from our perspective, I think it's really important to have officers equipped with cameras. So that we put that statement together, and hopefully at some point this committee can vote on that statement. I'd be curious to hear any thoughts on that. But that's all we have.
May
Okay.
I just add one thing? Not on the earlier comment by Michael. Bernard and I are well aware of the. There's been confusion about that 2017 review, which was done by two wonderful people, Bobby Nabel and Kelly Race, and it has been on the select board agenda twice. And both times there was still confusion. So it's run into some roadblocks. And I thought I might have explained that to Michael, but everybody should know it didn't get lost in the shuffle. It got shuffled into further clarification.
And then COVID happened, so.
Yeah, so it was on the agenda in October of 2019, and then the board discussed revisiting it in a few weeks and never did. So that's that. Yeah, does anyone have any comment about this? Should we take a position on body cameras, at least in principle? I don't know if this is appropriate, Bernard, to talk about it now.
Well, no, I mean,
sure
a vote's not appropriate because I think
right.
this is
No, I'm not talking about a vote,
thing
just the concept of having a vote.
Yeah, if anyone has any thoughts about it, that would be appropriate.
Well, if I may, sorry, hand raising. Yes, that's my bad. The question of accountability comes into this, right? And so when we think about accountability, one, as you mentioned, Michael Zurab, how can we, what level of distinction are we going to have between one person's word, or an officer's word against another, person's word on a given matter? And so, either dash cameras or body cameras, allow us to have insight into, what occurred, to draw a distinction between one person's word over the other.
But as we know, videotaped incidents can be viewed by different people different ways, and the Rodney King situation is an example of that. But point well taken.
Yeah, then you have a committee. You have a committee that reviews those videos, if that's the case, an independent committee.
Yeah, no, that's important. Who else? Oh, Ron.
Yeah. So I wanted a question that I wanted to forward to the two officers who spoke today was what their thoughts are about body cameras and dash cameras. I almost thought of a part of a new uniform as being a body camera on the uniform. So I am kind of curious about how other officers are feeling about that. I would like to feel that it helps them to feel that, you know, they're what they're doing is corroborated and validated in a positive way. But I am curious about how they feel about it. And in fact, I'll put that as one of the questions that I asked Devin to forward to them.
Yeah. And by the way, could you add to that a question I have, and that is, do the new uniforms really facilitate body cameras? Because as I understand, body cameras are clipped to the what's it called, the inseam of a shirt. So I mean that's just a minor issue that I think would be interesting to hear about. Okay. Oh, Janice, you had your hand up.
Yes, so since you raised the issue of body cams and dash cams, there is a warrant article that was submitted for the current warrant that's going to be discussed in November. I'm chair of the Public Safety Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee, and my subcommittee will be hearing that article. And I want to just throw it out there that you will be getting an invitation to attend the public hearing that the subcommittee holds. So, you know, I will put that out to both of the policing committees.
Great.
So I hope that you will participate. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, unless there's anything else, I'd like to move on to the walk and talk and outreach to public housing subcommittee, if it's been organized as a subcommittee. Yes, Elizabeth?
I just was thinking about the timing. If we do end up at some point in the future, Bernard, putting this on the agenda for a vote, it might be useful for us to have the information from Janice's subcommittee before that would happen. Because I think one of the things that is challenging about a vote is just feeling like we have enough information to make a well-informed vote.
Right, good point. Okay.
Well, there's
Janice,
two, sorry. I think that actually that allows an opportunity to clarify something. So there's two things at play. There's the statement that I circulated, which is somewhat different from the warrant article. So I think there's two separate things. There's a statement about collective bargaining, which is what we circulated. And then separately, there's a warrant article. And we had intended, I mean, the town meeting is in November. So I would like us to vote on the statement before then. I'm sure that's.
yeah, I think what Elizabeth is saying is that, you know, we have to have some basis for voting on it. So, you know, how do we get sort of informed on the issues?
I mean,
it's easy to say that, you know, everyone accepts the idea that body cameras are important.
Right. I mean, that's literally what the statement says.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. It's not. It's a statement of principles. So.
Bernard, may I clarify two things?
Sure.
First of all, the warrant article, which I've seen for good reason, is only a non-binding resolution, and it won't get voted till sometime in November, whether it passes or not. I'm guessing it'll pass overwhelmingly, but the statement that we proposed for a vote of this committee attempts to give a little push to the collective bargaining process that's going on right now, which ought to, if it gets into a draft contract, come to town meeting at the same town meeting, because town meeting has to approve that contract. The statement that we proposed is, and as one town meeting member, I endorse that I, as a town meeting member, will not vote for a police contract that does not have the cameras. And lastly, as to your comment, Bernard, this is not that complicated. It's going on all over the country. And I don't think this committee really needs to hear testimony from Janice's subcommittee, as wonderful as Janice is and as wonderful as her subcommittee will be. I think this is a no-brainer for this committee to make this statement, and it should be soon because of the collective bargaining.
Okay, I would want to hear from Ann Braga and Michael Downey, not tonight, but, you know, before we jump into this. But okay, let's move on. Janice, did you have something to say? No, okay, bring your hand down then. Okay, next, walk and talk outreach to public housing. What committee was that? What subcommittee was that?
Casey, I think you can take the lead.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So we've made really good progress on our survey, which you all saw a draft of 2 weeks ago. We've made some edits to the survey, taking into account the feedback that we received from this group. And I think at this point, we are almost ready to share the a draft survey instrument with some key members of Brookline Housing Authority, both residents, staff, and the board directors, to receive some feedback to make sure that they feel that we're also hitting the right questions, at which point we'll move forward with sharing that back with this group for final approval, and then we can distribute to our Brookline Housing Authority residents using, working in cooperation with the Housing Authority staff as well, to make sure that we're reaching the residents, and we'll have a translated version available as well in the languages that they tell us they'll need. They're willing to work with us on the distribution and making sure that the instrument is actually hitting the areas that they would also like to see questions. So, thank you all for the feedback that you shared, and thank you, Michael, for incorporating those into the draft that Jonathan and I have reviewed this week.
Alongside the survey, the interview questions are being tweaked. Thanks, Janice, for your feedback, and others. And so that, that's going to be sort of a boots on the ground. I have purchased one of these instruments here to interview people. I'm going to grab a microphone just to respect social distancing, so they can put it on them, and then I can use this to talk. One thing, just anticipating sort of the overflow of data, especially just from the interview itself, transcribing a 10-15 minute conversation with however many people that are going to be interviewed will not be an easy feat, and that task will certainly take up a lot of time, and so we spoke about budget. Well, we started to talk about looking into what budget we might have, and I would just want to put it out to perhaps look into acquiring a sort of transcribing software if possible, that could help facilitate transcribing conversations with individuals.
Okay, just my opinion. I thought that this was going to be a survey that you filled out on paper. When you talk about
It's
taking,
different things.
Pardon me?
Two different things.
Okay.
The survey's happening, and then Jonathan is also just interviewing folks in the community.
Okay, good. Just be aware, they could be public records.
Precisely,
and
that's
subject to fairly onerous state retention rules. So,
right, that's part of the reason why it's important to transcribe it, and having a transcribing tool would facilitate that process.
okay, why don't you? Issue of budgeting something like that is a touchy issue. Why don't you give the proposal to Devin, and we'll figure out how to do that.
Great.
Okay. Anything else?
Anne has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anne. Anne?
Just as far as you don't need to have a transcription to be the public record. The actual recording would be the public record. So if you were able to get what you need for the survey from listening to the interviews, then that's what you would use. We would need to actually keep the recording, and that would be the public record that we would need to retain. So the transcription wouldn't be a requirement for that.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's complex. Okay, anything else? I see Elizabeth, you have your hand up. In case, yes, use a hand raise. Anne, I'm sorry, Elizabeth?
I just had a question about the interviewing questions. just about the denominator of those interviewing questions so that the data is actually something that we feel we can hang our hats on in terms of the demographics that are chosen and a cross section and the different markers so that it's more, it would be a shame to put a lot of effort into something and then have the denominator not be well known or well defined enough for us to be able to really say this is a useful information.
Do you have a suggestion in terms of what that might look like?
I'm not the best study planner like this, but I do think it would be important to define the populations we want to study, define the percentages that we want to try to get to interview, and just kind of think forward before we did the work, what that would mean for us if we gathered this information. So I guess I think it's such a wonderful way to get data, but it might be more complicated.
Okay,
Right.
Mike Zerop's on the committee, and he's a data person, a quant, right? So figure that out.
I'm sure Jonathan and I can talk, but we might have to, depending on open meeting laws, we might have to post it somewhere.
Yeah, just as a quick, in terms of defining the population, this is walk and talk program that primarily operates, within housing. And so, those folks would be the main, that's the main population that are being interviewed. There are more personal questions and more general questions. And I guess, I think what you're getting at is like, okay, are you just only going to interview, the population, the housing population, or is it going to be people in Coach Corner or, in Washington Square, what have you, everybody in Brookline?
So Jonathan, there's two very distinct things happening.
But it could be within just the housing, but then, for example, age might be an issue. I think it's like one of those things to just plan forward before we do it, so we use that data once we get it.
Just to clarify, there's two very distinct things that are happening. One is a written survey that's being distributed to Brookline Housing Authority residents, specific to their experience with walk and talk. That is one component of what our committee is working on. Independent of that survey, Jonathan has a separate survey that he's conducting in the community, which are not the same questions and not specific necessarily to walk and talk or residents and housing. And those have been both people who have self-opted in, or it was posted on the townwide discussion board if people wanted to contact him and go through this process. And I believe in the future, the plan was, Jonathan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you would be in public areas like Coolidge Corner, Brookline Village, and Washington Square, maybe in areas around housing and Putterham Circle and whatnot, asking people to participate in a verbal survey with you. So there's two very distinct things that are happening here.
Well, just to correct the record, I think the main idea was to use interviews specific to walk and talk in conjunction to the survey. That would help us further understand by talking with people, their testimonials. So it's not necessarily a standalone independent thing. It's in conjunction to.
Right. Okay. So here, as chair of this committee, I'm going to appoint two people myself. And how about Dwayne Tyndall? Because he's done that type of survey work in the past. Is that okay with you, Dwayne?
No problem.
Okay. And we will participate as needed. But now you have 5 people on the subcommittee.
Thanks for joining us, Bernard and Dwayne.
Okay, next, chokeholds. I've had, and this is something I've taken up, and I assume as a one-person working group, or whatever you want to call it, on a discrete topic, I'm not subject to the open meeting law. Michael? At any rate, what I've done is to talk to Chief O'Leary and Michael Kevaney of the Brookline Police Union, just to get their thoughts. I've done some research in terms of terminology, which I don't have finalized right now. But as I see it, we can make a amendment to the, and this is something the select board would do if, you know, the committee went along with it, amendment to the use of force policy. And I don't think that there's anywhere else in the policies and procedures where it'd be necessary for us to make an amendment. But amendment in the use of force policy under the prohibitions to just add chokeholds or strangleholds or other techniques that cut off the supply of oxygen to the brain to impede the carotid artery may not be used as a regular technique to subdue a suspect, except, and this, you know, everyone said you need exception, except if the officer or another person is at risk of imminent death or serious bodily injury. And then I think that's, you know, what people said, you know, needs to be in here in order to deal with the situation where, I mean, it sounds silly, but, you know, an officer's wrestling with someone, and, you know, a chokehold of some sort is a wrestling thing, or, you know, is a way to get someone off of your back or whatever. But even in that situation, I think we need some language that says any limited exception applies only if it's the only alternative, et cetera, or if, and used only for as long as necessary to subdue the subject and handcuff or otherwise restrain. And then finally, we need to have something in here that says any use of this exception shall be reviewed immediately thereafter by the Office of Professional Responsibility, you know, et cetera. So, you know, I think, you know, that's my proposal, and I'm gonna, you know, write this up and circulate it to the committee, and you can jump on it in whatever way you want. And, you know, at some point we'll discuss it and hopefully get to the point of getting this incorporated into the policies and procedures. So, okay, Casey, I'm sorry, Paul, you had your hand up. Paul, you're muted. Please unmute.
I've encountered cases in court where the police officer uses a hole on the neck to recover evidence. Perhaps it should also be in that section for search for evidence. Because sometimes the police officer says they see a mouth carry, and that's common with drug cases. And I've had a couple of cases where police officers have used that type of chokehold to dislodge evidence from the mouth.
Okay. Yeah, please give your thoughts on that. I mean, yeah. Okay. Who else? I think Casey had her hand up.
Nope, sorry, Bernard. That was for the last conversation on the surveys.
Okay, how about you, Marty? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. Bernard, I welcome looking at this, but I think this is the wrong way to do it. I really think that by my count, there's 16 pages that we got on the use of force policies. I think it needs to be something in a subcommittee, and there's going to be a half a dozen things in there that need to be looked at. And I think to look at this one in isolation, because as you said at the last meeting, it's low-hanging fruit. I think that's a mistake. I think we should look at that whole thing with one of the subcommittees, which we're going to discuss very briefly in a few minutes, and not look at this one separately and talk about it as a full committee.
Okay. Look. Okay, Michael, what are your thoughts?
I have no comment on the previous comment made. I just want to say that, and I don't know if this is or isn't true, but I've been reading about the recent case of a police killing in Rochester, which had to do with a spit hood, which is also asphyxiating, but it's a somewhat different context from chokehold. And I was curious whether or not this proposal would deal with that. And if not, perhaps that's something that could also be considered. But
Yeah.
It's not
I mean,
something I know much about.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
reminded.
and I need to educate myself on that. But I think that, to the extent it's something that obstructs breathing, maybe it should be covered. But, that's something that, we should go through this and sort of give some thought to. And Marty's question, I think, looking at the use of force policy as a whole, or some other policies, should be separately from this. I mean, this is something that everyone expects us to have in our policy, and for us to delay putting it in when it's really a simple thing to do, I think is just not appropriate. So, Elizabeth, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I don't disagree in any way, Bernard, with us moving forward with changing this policy and changing the language. But I think we might be on really solid ground. And I guess I'm going to look to Chief O'Leary here for a second. I'm sure that there must be police data, national data about when you use and don't use chokeholds. We would want to know that when we would put this in, and just things like, if you don't do chokeholds, do you increase the risk of firearms? For example, those kinds of questions that you don't want to inadvertently do something that we don't understand or know the data about. And the idea of, I just think it might be helpful for us as a committee to have that data when we, maybe very briefly before we take a vote on this.
Good point. We'll do that. Okay. Anything else? I'm trying to end the meeting because I have a wedding to go to. Let's see, work plan topics. I was supposed to work with Mel and Chief O'Leary because of all the other things going on. We haven't done that, but that can be put together fairly quickly.
Bernard,
yes.
May I make a comment very quick
Sure.
on that? Michael and I, as something separate from our subcommittee, so we didn't have a quorum issue, discussed the possibility of working with you to try to help divide up the topics into subcommittees. So if you want,
Okay.
we're willing to help on that.
Okay, let's set up a subcommittee, get a couple other members and post it. Let's talk offline though. Okay, Marty?
Oh, well, whatever you as the chair want, I'll do.
Yeah.
Except when I disagree.
Yeah, and then I prevail. Okay, the final thing is September 30th, joint public hearing with the task force. I think that should be at 7 o'clock. Does that make sense to other people?
7
Okay.
a.m. or p.m.?
Makes sense to me.
PM. Yeah, not me, it's 7 a.m. Although I have had meetings at 7 a.m. They're brutal. Anyway, okay.
Bernard, what is, are we gonna have an idea what the format is gonna be? I mean, is it just inviting anyone who wants to come talk about the police department to come in, which is fine with me?
Yeah, I'd like to do this a little, informally, meaning that, it's an open mic. People have things to say, they can get up and say it. Complaints, suggestions, whatever. I think it should be open-ended so that we really get a unvarnished view of what people in the community are thinking. Now, it's not going to be totally an accurate view because, the people who call in are going to be certain, certain types of people. But, it'll be something for us to start, it'll be a start to getting a sense of the community. Okay. Our next meeting is the 23rd for the educational thing, which is now going to be online. Should we have a committee meeting in addition to that, or do you want to have one next week?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. We have the educational session and you're saying, right. You're asking.
It was originally conceived of as a town hall type meeting. in lieu of a meeting of the committee. Now it's being conceived of as a series of video tapes that people can view. So we have that date that we can meet if we want, or we can meet next week.
Well, Bernard, my feeling is we need to get some subcommittees going soon, and I'm hoping that what I talked about in my last comment, a proposed differentiation of the various topics into subcommittees can be resolved quickly. So I personally would hope that we could have a proposal on that to be discussed and tweaked at the next meeting and get those subcommittees going.
Okay,
I'd be in favor next week on that.
Okay, what do other people think? Let's see, no one has their hands raised. So are people willing to meet next week on the 16th? I have a hearing that evening, but I guess we could meet in the morning. Want to do that? Make it next week at 9.
Yeah, can do that.
I have my hand up, Bernard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Just put it up. So I know that one question that was there was whether the education subcommittee, the subcommittee that's even planning these videos, needs to have a meeting before the 23rd, and we had decided whether it was going to be like next Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. But I think we might have to resolve that before deciding we're going to have a full committee meeting. Just because there might be a conflict in times.
Okay, I thought that, okay, we were discussing that and my internet service crashed. So I thought that we were thinking about Monday. Okay, why don't we plan to have that meeting on Monday and have the committee meeting on Wednesday, this time at 9 in the morning.
What time for the committee meeting on Monday, just so I know for posting?
What time do people want?
Monday's a bad day I could do it early, but my son is moving to Spain that day, so.
So how early?
Oh, I mean, we don't have to leave the house till, I just can't do an evening meeting.
Okay.
I have to leave the house by 4, so anytime during the day is fine.
Would 11 work for people? 3 people in this committee?
What about 9 a.m.?
Well, no, this is not for the whole committee. It's just Ron, Janice,
subcommittee.
and Jen.
Okay.
Yeah, subcommittee.
Subcommittee.
Okay. How about 11?
Anytime in the morning works for me, Bernard.
Okay. Okay, let's make it 11 a.m. for that meeting, and then the meeting of the full committee on Wednesday, the 16th at 9. Or do people want to make it a little later on Wednesday?
I have something 8 o'clock. Could we do 9:30?
I'm fine with 9:30. Extra half-hour sleep. Okay, 9:30.
And I'll just add, I'm not a voting member of the committee, so not as important as the rest, but I may have to, I can join in the beginning, but I'll have to sign off because I have a hearing at 10:30. So.
Okay, we'll save our questions for you for the beginning.
Okay, great. Yeah. I should have announced that, I guess. I'm joking.
My phone just answered apparently either something I said or something you said. It really irritates me. Any rate, okay, anything else? Okay, I think that's the plan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the wedding.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Put on my Potemkin suit.